Let me ask you something. Have you ever looked at someone and thought, how do they do it? Not because they're loud or flashy, but because there's something quietly powerful about the way they live. They show up with purpose. They handle stress with grace. They make decisions with clarity, and no matter what life throws at them, they keep moving forward. You can feel it. They're different. Not just successful, but grounded. Not just productive, but principled. They don't just do more, they do better. And the question is, why? What separates those people from the rest? What's the difference between someone who lives deliberately and someone who just goes through the motions? Is it talent? No. Is it luck? Rarely. Is it money, privilege, opportunity? Those can help, sure, but they're not the foundation. The real difference is something much simpler and much more powerful. It's their habits, because habits are what you do without thinking. Habits are what show up when motivation runs out. Habits are who you become on autopilot. And when you look closely, the people who rise above, the ones who stay steady when others shake, who act when others hesitate, who grow when others plateau, they've built their lives on a different set of habits, not flashy ones, not complicated ones, simple, strong, consistent actions that they've chosen, trained and repeated until they've become part of who they are. And that's the key. Because you don't rise to the level of your dreams, you fall to the level of your habits. In this video, I want to show you 10 of those habits. 10 simple but powerful ways that great people structure their thoughts, their time and their choices, rooted in one of the oldest and most effective philosophies in human history: Stoicism. Now, maybe you've heard of the Stoics. Maybe you've seen quotes from Marcus Aurelius or Seneca or Epictetus floating around on social media. But Stoicism isn't just a collection of inspiring quotes. It's a way of life. It's a daily discipline that's been shaping extraordinary people for over 2,000 years. People who faced war, exile, disease, betrayal, and death, and met those moments not with panic, but with principle. The Stoics believed that greatness isn't something that happens to you, it's something you train for. Something you build, something you earn through the way you live every single day. They weren't interested in being impressive. They were interested in being excellent, in being useful, in being just, in being unshakable. And in a world like ours, filled with noise and chaos and endless comparison, I think that's what we're all looking for, not to be more average, but to rise, to lead ourselves better, to live with more clarity, more strength, and more peace. But that's not going to happen by accident. It happens when you adopt the right habits, when you begin to make different choices, not once, but over and over. When you stop reacting and start living on purpose. That's what this video is about. 10 simple habits that great people live by. 10 ways you can begin today to move out of mediocrity and into mastery. So whether you're struggling with discipline, drowning in distraction, or just looking to take your life to the next level, not through hype, but through substance, this is for you. Because greatness isn't a mystery, it's a method. And it's available to anyone who's willing to do the work. Let's walk through the habits that make the difference. Let's learn from the ancient wisdom that shaped history's strongest minds. Let's look in the mirror, not with guilt, but with clarity. And let's begin to separate ourselves, not from others, but from the version of ourselves that settles. You don't need to change your whole life today. You just need to change your direction, and a single habit can do that, so let's get into it. Let's break down the 10 simple habits that separate great people from average ones. One choice at a time, one day at a time. Starting right now. The first habit that separates great people from average ones is reflection, not casual reflection. Not once in a while reflection. I'm talking about deliberate, daily, honest reflection, the kind that isn't always comfortable. The kind that doesn't just ask what happened today, but asks why it happened, how you showed up, and who you're becoming because of it. The Stoics were obsessive about this practice. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote his thoughts down every night, not for anyone else, but for himself. That book became what we now call Meditations, but it wasn't meant to be a masterpiece, it was meant to be a mirror. A mirror that showed him not just where he was strong, but where he needed to grow. He asked himself questions like, did I let anger lead me? Did I live according to my principles? Did I waste time on things that don't matter? Now ask yourself, when's the last time you looked at your day that way? Most people don't. Most people live reactively. They go from one task to the next, one emotion to the next, one week to the next without ever pausing to ask, what is this making me into? They don't know where their time goes. They don't know why they're tired. They don't know why they feel stuck, because they're not looking. But the great ones, they look. And they look every single day. And here's the secret. This isn't about judgment. It's not about beating yourself up. It's about seeing clearly. It's about measuring progress against your own values, not the world's opinions. It's about catching the drift before it becomes a spiral. It's about waking up, because clarity creates alignment. And alignment creates power. When you know what you value, when you know where you fell short, when you know where you were strong, that's when you can adjust. That's when you grow. So how do you build this habit? Start small. At the end of each day, ask yourself 3 simple questions. What did I do well today? Where did I fall short of my values? What will I do differently tomorrow? Write it down, just a few sentences. Make it a ritual, not a chore. And be honest, that's the key. Average people lie to themselves to feel better. Great people tell the truth to get better. They choose discomfort in the short term for strength in the long term. It's not glamorous. It's not exciting, but it works, because over time you begin to see the patterns. You begin to notice the excuses. You begin to close the gap between who you are and who you want to be. And that gap, that's where greatness lives. The second habit is to control the controllables. This is Stoicism 1:1. It's one of the most powerful mental shifts you'll ever make. And once you make it, you'll never look at stress the same way again. Here's how it works. Epictetus said, some things are up to us, and some things are not. That might sound obvious, but think about how many times you've worried about something completely outside your control. What someone thinks of you, whether or not a project will be perfectly received, whether you'll be lucky, whether the economy will behave, whether other people will act how you want them to. That kind of thinking is everywhere. And it's exhausting, because when your mind lives in things you can't control, you give your power away. You become emotionally reactive. You start to feel like a victim, like life is happening to you. But great people don't live like that. Great people focus on what's theirs, their effort, their mindset, their preparation, their attitude, their actions. And that changes everything. Let's say you're working toward a goal. Maybe it's a business, a personal challenge, a creative pursuit. You can't guarantee success, but you can guarantee discipline. You can't control the outcome, but you can control whether you showed up with courage, with honesty, with your full focus. Average people obsess over how things look. Great people obsess over how they show up, because they know that over time, showing up well wins. It might not win fast, it might not win easily, but it wins deeply. And it wins in a way that builds real confidence, the kind that's not tied to results, but to effort. And let's be clear, this isn't passive. It's not, oh well, I guess I can't control anything. It's about fierce ownership. It's about taking full responsibility for the piece of the world that's in your hands, and letting go, intentionally, of everything else. Because trying to control what's not yours, that's not power, that's delusion. Think about the times in your life when you were most drained. I'll bet it was when you were fighting something outside your reach, trying to make someone act how you wanted, trying to change the past, trying to force the future. But when you come back to your circle of influence, your thoughts, your choices, your virtues, you feel peace again. You feel grounded. You feel strong. So here's the habit. When stress hits, when fear rises, when you feel overwhelmed, ask yourself, is this in my control? If yes, act on it with everything you've got. If not, release it completely, not halfway. Not with one eye still on it. Let it go, not because it doesn't matter, but because it's not yours. That's what separates the great from the average. Not a life free of problems, but a mind free from unnecessary suffering. A mind that is focused, clear, and powerful because it isn't distracted by everything it can't change. Master this habit, and you master your energy. You master your attention. And when you master those, you become unstoppable, not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. Let's move on to the third habit. Choose discomfort voluntarily. Now, I know that sounds counterintuitive. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid discomfort. They seek the path of least resistance, chase comfort, convenience, ease, and on the surface that makes sense. Why suffer if you don't have to? But here's what the Stoics understood, and what great people live out every day. Comfort is a trap. It's not that comfort is wrong, it's that comfort, when sought constantly and without question, weakens you. It makes your mind soft, it makes your decisions small, it makes your world shrink. That's why the greats train in discomfort. They don't wait for adversity to find them, they seek it out. Not recklessly, not for drama, but intentionally, because they know that strength isn't built when everything's going well. It's built in the resistance. It's built in the tension. It's built in the moments when most people quit. Seneca, one of the wealthiest and most influential men in Rome, practiced poverty on purpose. He would sleep on the floor, wear rough clothing, eat the simplest food, not because he had to, but because he wanted to prove to himself that he could. He wanted to know that if he lost everything, he'd still be okay. He wanted to kill fear before fear had the chance to control him. Marcus Aurelius, in the middle of war and plague, reminded himself, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." That wasn't morbid. That was a call to action. That was clarity born from facing discomfort head-on. And Epictetus, who lived much of his life as a slave, taught that the only thing we truly own is our will. Not our bodies, not our possessions, not even our reputation, just our inner response. That's where freedom lives. And that freedom is earned through training. So how does that apply to you? Simple. Start building the habit of choosing the hard thing, not every time, but more often than you do now. Take the stairs, say no when it's easier to say yes, wake up early. Do the work when you don't feel like it. Have the conversation you're avoiding. Face the fear instead of waiting for it to disappear. Because here's the truth, the moment you choose discomfort, you're already ahead of most people, not because you're tougher, but because you're willing to grow. Average people avoid the fire. Great people walk through it, not because they love pain, but because they love who they become on the other side. So next time you feel resistance, don't turn away, turn toward it. Say, "This is where I sharpen, this is where I grow." That's how you train your character, that's how you train your courage. And that's how you become someone who doesn't just survive difficulty, but is forged by it. Now let's talk about the fourth habit. Delay reaction, master response. This one is huge. Because the way you respond to life, especially in the heat of the moment, says more about your strength than any title, any achievement, or any speech ever will. We all know what it's like to react. Someone cuts you off in traffic. A friend says something disrespectful. A colleague takes credit for your work. You feel the spark of anger or embarrassment or insecurity, and you respond immediately. You snap, you defend, you shut down. And then maybe later when the emotion fades, you think, why did I let that get to me? That's reaction. It's fast. It's automatic. It's emotional, and it's often destructive. But Stoicism teaches us there's a gap, a sacred gap, between stimulus and response. And in that gap lies your freedom, the freedom to pause, to breathe, to think, to choose. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That's not just a nice quote. That's a habit, a practice, a muscle you train. The average person lives at the mercy of their emotions. They let external events dictate their inner world. But the greats know how to pause. They know how to observe a feeling without becoming it. They know how to wait until the emotion passes and then act with reason, with principle, with purpose. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." So how do you train this habit? You start by noticing. The next time you feel triggered, don't respond right away. Take a breath. Literally, one deep breath can change everything. Ask yourself, is this worth reacting to? Is this who I want to be right now? What would a wise person do in this moment? That question, what would a wise person do, is one of the most powerful tools you'll ever have, because it takes you out of the storm and into perspective. Over time, your reflexes change. You stop needing to prove yourself. You stop taking things personally. You stop giving your peace away to every little inconvenience. You begin to respond with calm, with clarity, with control. And that's not weakness, that's strength. The kind of strength that can lead, that can endure, that can inspire. The kind of strength that turns you from someone who reacts like everyone else into someone who lives like no one else. This habit won't make you robotic. It'll make you deliberate. It'll make you effective. It'll make you powerful, not in a loud way, but in a way that people feel. Because the person who can remain calm in the chaos is the person everyone looks to. The person who doesn't just act, but acts rightly. That's the person who rises. That's the person who separates. That's the person who becomes great. The fifth habit that separates great people from average ones is to live by values, not feelings. Now this one cuts deep, because we live in a culture that tells you to follow your heart, to do what feels right, to let your emotions guide the way. But Stoicism flips that completely. It doesn't ignore emotion, but it refuses to be ruled by it. The Stoics taught that the path to a meaningful life isn't paved by what feels good. It's paved by what is good. And what is good? Not success. Not comfort, not applause. Good to a Stoic is virtue. It's courage, it's wisdom, it's justice. It's self-discipline. These are the only things truly in your control, and these are the only things worth building your life around. Great people live this way. They don't ask, "What do I feel like doing?" They ask, "What's the right thing to do?" They don't let moods determine their morals. They don't let impulses define their character. They decide who they want to be, and then they live that way, whether it feels easy or not. Because here's the truth. Feelings change. They rise and fall like the tide. One moment you're excited, the next you're anxious. One morning you feel motivated, the next you feel heavy. That's normal. That's human. But you can't build your life on a foundation that's always shifting. Average people get tossed around by their emotions. They let anger speak for them. They let fear paralyze them. They let insecurity silence them. But great people return to their values again and again and again. When things get hard, they go back to principle. When things go well, they stay grounded in purpose. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That's the filter. That's the compass. Not your mood, not your feelings, your values. So, how do you make this a habit? You start by getting clear. What are your values? Not what sounds good on paper. What actually guides you when no one's watching? What matters more to you than comfort, than success, than being liked? Write it down, define it clearly. Then, every time you're faced with a decision, big or small, ask yourself, does this align with my values, or am I just following a feeling? That one habit changes everything, because when you live by values, you don't need constant motivation. You don't need perfect circumstances. You have something stronger. You have direction. You have discipline. You have peace, not the fragile kind that depends on everything going your way, but the deep kind that comes from knowing you stayed true to what matters. And that kind of life, that's rare, that's powerful, that's greatness in action. Let's keep going. The sixth habit is simple but rare. Speak little, mean much. The Stoics were known for their clarity. Their words were measured, precise, intentional. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, believed silence was training for the soul. Epictetus taught that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And Seneca warned that most people waste not only their time but their words, talking too much, saying too little. Great people understand this. They don't dominate conversations. They don't speak to impress. They speak to impact. And when they do speak, people listen, because their words carry weight. Average people often fill silence with noise. They say what's easy. They gossip. They exaggerate. They ramble. But great people know the power of restraint. They understand that words are tools, not toys, and they use them carefully. Think about the people in your life who truly move you. Not just with passion, but with precision. They don't speak endlessly, but when they do speak, there's clarity. There's depth, there's intention. That's not an accident. That's a habit. It starts with listening. Great people listen more than they talk. Not just to respond, but to understand. They watch, they observe. They read between the lines, because they're not just gathering information, they're learning people. They're understanding context. They're thinking before they speak, and when they do speak, they speak from values, from principle, from a calm and deliberate mind, not from impulse or ego. This kind of speech has power, not the loud kind, not the persuasive kind, but the kind that changes atmospheres, the kind that builds trust, the kind that sticks with people long after the conversation ends. So here's the habit to build. Say less, but say it better. Ask yourself before you speak, is this true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Is it helpful? Will it move the conversation forward? Will it reflect my values? If the answer is no, let silence speak for you. That doesn't mean you become withdrawn. It means you become purposeful. It means your presence carries more weight than your volume. It means your words matter because you don't waste them. Over time, people will begin to notice. They'll lean in when you talk. They'll value your perspective. And more importantly, you'll respect yourself, because you'll know that what you say comes from a place of truth, not performance. This habit builds leadership. It builds credibility, and it builds inner calm. Because when your words are few and intentional, your mind becomes less cluttered. You start to speak less from reaction and more from reflection. And in a world full of noise, being someone whose words cut through is rare. It's powerful. It's stoic. And it's a habit that will serve you every day of your life. Let's move into the seventh habit. Guard your time like a fortress. This might be one of the most practical but most ignored habits that separates great people from everyone else. Because if there's one thing you can never get back, one thing that slips away whether you notice it or not, it's time. And the difference between a life of purpose and a life of regret often comes down to how that time is spent. Seneca wrote an entire essay called On the Shortness of Life, and in it he made a simple but brutal point. Life isn't short, we just waste a lot of it. The average person lives like they have unlimited days ahead. They let others steal their time. They scroll, they drift, they procrastinate. And then they wonder why they feel empty. But the greats live like time is sacred. They guard it, they budget it, they say no. They prioritize what matters and cut what doesn't, not because they're cold, but because they understand the cost of distraction. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." That's not meant to scare you, it's meant to focus you. To remind you that every moment spent on the trivial is a moment stolen from the meaningful. So what does this habit look like in practice? It means looking at your calendar and asking, does this align with who I want to become? It means turning off your phone when you're working. It means not saying yes out of guilt or obligation. It means creating a rhythm to your day that supports your growth instead of undermining it. And here's something most people miss. Every time you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else. So if you say yes to staying up late watching meaningless content, you're saying no to waking up early to work on your goals. If you say yes to endless social scrolling, you're saying no to solitude, focus, and creation. Great people don't get more time. They just use it better. They don't fill their schedule, they fill their soul. They make space for what matters: reading, learning, creating, resting, reflecting, because they know that's where greatness is built, not in the noise, but in the space. Start by doing a time audit. Where does your time actually go? Be brutally honest. Then decide, what are the few things that truly matter to me? What do I need to say no to in order to say yes to those? Guard your time like it's your life, because it is. And when you start living that way, your days become clearer, simpler, stronger. You no longer feel rushed, you feel focused. And that focus becomes a superpower. Let's talk now about the 8th habit. Find strength in solitude. In today's world, solitude is misunderstood. People associate being alone with being lonely. We're constantly surrounded by noise, stimulation, opinions, updates, distractions. But the Stoics believed that the quiet places where the world fades and the self emerges are where true strength is formed. Marcus Aurelius led one of the most powerful empires in history, but he still found time, often late at night or early in the morning, to be alone with his thoughts. That's how Meditations was born. Epictetus taught in humble settings, away from the spotlight, sharpening minds in obscurity. Seneca warned against the crowd, not because he hated people, but because he knew how easily we become what we surround ourselves with. Solitude is not isolation. Solitude is presence with yourself. It's where you hear your own voice again. It's where you ask the questions no one else can answer for you. Who am I becoming? What matters to me? What am I avoiding? Average people run from solitude. They fill every silence. They chase validation. They numb the discomfort of being alone with distraction. But great people sit in it. They lean into it. They use it as fuel, because in solitude you don't just think. You clarify. You don't just rest. You realign. Solitude teaches you to lead yourself. And if you can't lead yourself, you'll always be led by someone else. You'll follow trends. You'll crave approval. You'll lose your sense of direction the moment life gets loud. So make solitude a habit. Not once a year on a retreat, but daily. A walk with no phone. A quiet morning with just a notebook. A few minutes before bed to sit in stillness. Time where it's just you and your thoughts, your breath, your questions. Don't be afraid of what you'll find in silence. Be afraid of what you'll miss if you never listen, because the world will always try to pull you away from yourself. But greatness requires you to return, again and again, to remember who you are, what you value, what you're building. In solitude, your roots grow deep. Your vision gets sharper, your confidence becomes quiet but unshakable, and that kind of confidence, that's the foundation for every great life. The 9th habit that separates great people from average ones is this: turn obstacles into lessons. This is one of the most powerful ideas in all of Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius said, The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That's not just poetic, it's practical. It's a way of seeing the world that flips everything upside down. Instead of seeing problems as interruptions, you start seeing them as instruction. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you start asking, "What is this here to teach me?" Average people see obstacles and stop. They get discouraged. They tell themselves a story about how they're unlucky, how things never work out, how life is against them. They wait for conditions to change, for people to be different, for the world to get easier. But great people take the hit and move forward anyway. They don't just endure hardship, they extract meaning from it. They mine difficulty for wisdom. They take the very thing that should have broken them and turn it into a tool for building the next level of who they are. This isn't about pretending everything is good. It's about refusing to waste pain. The Stoics weren't blind to suffering. They faced war, exile, slavery, betrayal, but they didn't run from it. They leaned in and asked, "How can I use this?" Think about the biggest challenge you're facing right now. Maybe it's a financial struggle, a relationship breakdown, a failure, a loss, a mistake. Whatever it is, pause and ask yourself, what if this isn't the thing blocking my path? What if this is the path? What if this is the exact experience I need to become stronger, wiser, more focused? What if this is how I learn patience, build character, sharpen discipline? When you start to see life that way, everything changes. You no longer need the world to be smooth. You don't need things to go your way. Because you're not living for comfort, you're living for growth. And growth doesn't happen in the easy places. It happens in the friction. So here's how to build the habit. Every time something goes wrong, train yourself to ask 3 questions. First, what can I learn from this? Second, how can I grow because of this? And third, how can I act now with more clarity and strength? That simple shift takes you from powerless to powerful. Because you're no longer the victim of the situation, you're the author of your response. This habit builds resilience, it builds grit, and it builds a kind of quiet confidence that can't be faked. The kind that says, "I've been through worse and I'm still here." The kind that makes other people wonder how you keep going, how you stay grounded. And the answer is simple. You stopped seeing problems as problems. You started seeing them as practice. Now we come to the 10th habit. Take action without applause. This one might be the hardest, because we all want to be seen. We all want recognition. We want our work to be appreciated, our progress to be noticed. There's nothing wrong with that. It's human. But the Stoics remind us, if you live for applause, you'll always be a servant to other people's opinions. You'll hesitate to act unless someone is watching. You'll shape your life around being liked instead of being true. And that, over time, destroys your peace. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That's brutal, but it's honest. Greatness often looks strange to the average eye. Deep focus, discipline, solitude, sacrifice, these aren't popular. They don't get you instant validation. They're quiet. They're private, but they're the foundation of everything that matters. Great people act because it's right, not because it's recognized. They build the habit of showing up whether or not anyone sees it. They do the work in the dark. They train when no one is clapping. They take steps forward when the path is lonely. Because they're not living for applause, they're living for purpose. The average person needs constant reinforcement to keep going. They check for likes, for praise, for approval. And when they don't get it, they slow down. They question themselves. They stop. But the greats, they've already decided, they've already committed. The external noise doesn't change the internal standard. They don't need to be seen. They need to be aligned. They need to be excellent. They need to be true. So how do you make this habit real? Start by practicing doing things without telling anyone. Do the workout without posting it. Read the book without sharing the highlight. Help someone without recording it. Make progress quietly. Build in silence. Let your results speak, but only when it's time. And even then, don't depend on the praise. It's not that recognition is bad. It's that it can't be the fuel. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, keep going. Because your discipline, your vision, your values, that's your fuel. The people who change the world, who shape culture, who leave legacies, they aren't the ones chasing likes. They're the ones building brick by brick, day by day, regardless of whether the world is watching. And when you live that way, you unlock something powerful. You free yourself. You no longer perform. You no longer crave approval. You act because you are called to act. You do what's right because it's right, not because it's popular or profitable or praised. That's the mark of greatness. Quiet consistency, invisible discipline, relentless purpose. And it's available to anyone who's willing to do the work. Unseen, uncelebrated, and absolutely unstoppable. So here we are, at the end of this journey. 10 habits. 10 ways of thinking and living that the Stoics practiced and that every great person, consciously or not, embodies. And now it's your turn. Let's step back for a moment and look at what you've just walked through. You've learned how daily reflection isn't just a tool for self-awareness, it's a tool for transformation. You've discovered that focusing on what you can control is not weakness, it's your greatest power. You've faced the truth that voluntary discomfort builds the kind of resilience that comfort never will. You've seen how emotional mastery is about slowing down, pausing, and choosing who you want to be in the middle of the storm. You've realized that values are more stable than feelings, and that greatness requires alignment, not mood. You've seen the power of restraint in your words, the quiet leadership that grows when you speak less but with more meaning. You've heard the call to protect your time, to treat every hour as sacred. You've touched the silence that makes your thinking clearer and your spirit stronger. You've learned to see obstacles not as blocks but as blueprints. And you've been challenged to act without needing the world's approval, to do what's right simply because it is. These aren't just habits, they're a way of being. They're the blueprint for a life that isn't just busy, but built. Not just reactive, but rooted. Not just productive, but powerful. And here's the real secret. These habits aren't reserved for the elite, the chosen, the gifted. They are available to anyone who decides that average is no longer acceptable. Anyone who's tired of living by accident. Anyone who's ready to stop talking about change and start living it. That means you. You don't have to do all 10 at once. In fact, you shouldn't. This isn't about overwhelming yourself with change. It's about direction. Choose one. The one that hits you the hardest. The one that's whispering to you right now. The one you know you've been avoiding. Start there, today. Make it yours, not just in your mind, but in your day, in your choices. In your routines, in your actions. Because here's the truth most people miss. Transformation isn't one big moment. It's thousands of small ones. It's the decision to reflect instead of distract, to pause instead of react, to act instead of wait, to align instead of drift. It's what you do when no one's watching. It's the promises you keep to yourself. It's the habits you choose to carry when comfort tells you to quit. That's the difference. That's the line, not talent, not luck, not appearance, habits. Simple, disciplined, deliberate habits that form the foundation of an uncommon life. The Stoics weren't superhuman, they were just consistent, they weren't born fearless. They practiced courage, they weren't naturally wise, they worked on it daily. And they did it without applause, without recognition, without reward, because they knew the work itself was the reward. They knew that the soul grows stronger, not when the world cheers you on, but when you choose to stand firm, to show up, to do the right thing day after day. So, here's your challenge. Don't just admire these habits, adopt them. Don't just agree with the philosophy. Apply it, don't just nod your head, move your feet. Take one step, then another. Build something real. Your greatness isn't buried under years of failure, it's waiting on the other side of your habits. Choose them wisely. Live them fully, and you'll become the kind of person the world needs, the kind of person you were always meant to be. No one's coming to make that choice for you, but everything you need is already inside you. It starts with a decision, and that decision starts now.